They are here. They have finally arrived. The Helsmiths of Hashut, the Chaos Dwarfs, the little guys with the big hats and the cool big cowbot. They're all here with a whole bunch of other cool, new and exciting things. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the Chaos Dwarfs specifically and how you can get them to the tabletop and make use of their really fun, quirky and kind of wacky abilities. But enough rambling, let's dive right in and check out their battle traits. So we are on Warcrier to check out the new rules. Just because it's easier to go through, easier to ramble. I love a good ramble, so I'm going to ramble on through this. If you want to find the rules yourself, I've put the links in the description down below. I've also linked Warcrier down there. It's one of the best tools for Warcrier there is. Check it out. It has all the rules, all the factions. It's a good time. But let's dive into their battle trait. And this is one of their most contentious features, right? The Chaos Dwarfs' most contentious feature is probably their battle trait because it is so flavorful and potentially so impactful that, well, if you take allies, right, you lose your battle trait. If you take allies within Chaos Dwarfs, you lose your battle trait and you lose a lot of their flavor. Not all of their flavor, because their abilities are incredibly flavorful as well, but their trait really helps them. And we're going to go into it now and check out what it does. And in short, you basically have a new resource. It's a resource that you can spend called demonic power points, demon points going forward. It's much easier to say. And this combos with one of their abilities called Leave the Land in Ruin, which I'll get to in a little bit. But basically you can generate these demon points over the course of the game, and you will generate these consistently throughout the course of the game. And you can spend these points on your fighters to make their next attack action, or more specifically, their first attack action of any given turn, more powerful. This applies to both melee and ranged attacks and is very substantial. You can spend up to 3, and if you spend 1 demon point, you gain +1 to your crit in melee, and 1 crit gets +1 damage if you are using a range attack. So it's been balanced to make range not too oppressive, but in melee, all those crits get the +1. If you spend 2 demon points, you gain all that crit stuff. In addition, your attack gains +1 strength, which is very impactful. And finally, if you spend 3 demon points, you get the other 2 effects. In addition, you gain +1 attack. Remember, all of these effects apply to both ranged and to melee. And these are not inconsequential buffs, these are substantial buffs, and they do not count as abilities, which means you can combo these with abilities and make your guys even more swole. These demon point buffs only last for 1 attack action, but as we will see within the greater scheme of the Chaos Dwarfs, they really don't want to get stuck into prolonged combat. A lot of their play, a lot of their abilities, a lot of even their stat lines seem more focused on moving and then attacking, which plays perfectly into the demonic power points that we have here because it only applies to your next attack action, not to the whole turn. So that's important to bear in mind. And additionally, remember that the stats on your baseline guys may not be the best, but you can always augment them with demon points, so they may look a little bit undercooked on paper, but in reality, they're actually quite a bit stronger. And the final thing is, only Helsmiths of Hashut warriors can benefit. This largely won't come up because everything in this warband is a warrior. The only exception to this rule are the Hobgrot Vandals, who are not, so they don't get the benefit of this. They don't get the benefit of a few things, but it's important that your Grots can't get more powerful. They're basically just throwaway chuds. So moving on from their battle trait, we're going to skip over the reaction for now because that applies specifically to their Hobgrot Vandals. We're going to go straight into their next ability, and that ability is Leave the Land in Ruin. And the reason why I'm going over this ability now, and I'm not going to go over units immediately, is because Leave the Land in Ruin works with your battle trait. It's the only thing that works directly with it. In fact, you can't use your battle trait if you don't use it in conjunction with Leave the Land in Ruin. Basically, you pick a guy, that guy gets a little 3-inch bubble, and all obstacles gain a friendly desolation token. And this is really cool because those desolation tokens convert directly 1-for-1 into demon points for the rest of the turn at the start of the battle round. So basically how you want to use Leave the Land in Ruin is to use this as many times as you can on turn 1. The only caveat is that a piece of terrain can only hold one desolation token. So you can't just spam it in the same place. You have to move around. You have to move around the board quickly on turn 1 to tag as much as you possibly can. This also means models with really big bases benefit way more from Leave the Land in Ruin. For example, the Desolation engine is on an 80mm round base. You can hit like 5 or 6 pieces of terrain with a single Leave the Land in Ruin in that case. But in general, you're really looking to hit like 2, maybe 3 pieces of terrain at a time, and then do this multiple times across the board, and then not really do it anymore after turn 1, because after turn 1, this is your turn to set up and to propel the rest of your game into greater power. You don't want to be losing tempo and using resources on Leave the Land in Ruin all that often after turn 1. I found that in general you want to look to gather between 6 and 10 demon power points per turn. So if you can get that on turn 1, you have set yourself perfectly for the rest of the game. Now, moving on from abilities in general, we will touch on abilities going forward, but we're going to touch on those abilities when they become relevant for specific fighters. We're going to start with their heroes, and we start with their War Despot, and this is a fantastic place to start. My god, the War Despot is almost a must-take in every single list. He is your go-to mainline, the sort of like beta, defensive piece, and support piece all rolled into one. He has some of the best stats in the warband, despite those stats being a little bit middling, but still range 2, 4424 is a solid melee profile. 175 points is a good price point, and toughness 5 and 25 wounds is quite durable. I'm going to beat this like a dead horse over and over again. Remember, this guy of course can use demon points to enhance his stats to a 5-5-2-5, and that is a much more threatening profile. He is quite good in combat when he needs to be, but he's more here for his ability, which is called Black-Hearted Conqueror. I'll just call that Black-Hearted going forward. So you pick 3 visible friendly fighters with your Helsmiths of Hashut rune mark, and this has no range. So if you can see them, you can pick them, you always pick 3, and they all immediately make a bonus move action up to 3 inches. This is incredible. Words struggle to convey just how powerful Black-Hearted Conqueror is. Because it has no range, it always hits 3 models, and you get to move your guys, and it's only a double. This is incredibly powerful, and it is the core of your warband's mobility. Because of Black-Hearted Conqueror, you look at your stats and you go, ah man, they're only moving 3 for the most part, they're quite slow. They are not slow. They are deceptively fast, and your War Despot is basically there to propel your warband forward towards objectives, away with treasures or towards treasures, into combat, reposition, and just be a general all-around nightmare. Black-Hearted Conquerors is outstanding in every sense of the word, and because of that, you absolutely want to take a Despot in just about every list. Some people have thrown around the ideas of taking 2 Despots, and 2 Despots are fine. They're quite expensive at 175 points, but the benefits of taking 2 is that in missions where you can't guarantee you have your War Despot on the board turn 1, if you have 2, you more or less guarantee you always have access to a Despot on turn 1. My stance on this is that I don't actually want my Despot on the board turn 1, because turn 1 I want to burn all of my doubles on Leave the Land in Ruin, so ideally my Despot actually comes on turn 2 anyway. So for me, 1 Despot is definitely enough. 2 Despots is doable, I just don't see it being worth the investment, and I think you also weaken your play potentially in other areas by doing that. But overall, the War Despot is definitely a one-of. He is the core leader of your whole warband. He is a wonderful piece in just every single way. And he can fight, and he's durable. It's just it's an all-round package. Then we move on to the Ashen Elder. And the Ashen Elder at 140 is a pretty darn good wizard. He has an okay melee profile at like 3-4-2-3. It is what it is. He has a full-powered wizard bolt at 2-3-3-6, and of course he's toughness 4 with 20 wounds, so he's a standard wizard with all the trimmings. What makes the Ashen Elder especially dangerous is, of course, he can be comboed with demon points on his ranged attacks and even his melee attacks. But at range, you can buff that range attack to a 3-4-3-7. With blessings, it goes to a 3-5-3-7, of course, if you give him +1 strength. And even in melee, he goes to a 4-5-2-4, which isn't great, but it makes him okay at fighting in melee. It actually makes him almost on par with a War Despot in melee, especially thanks to that range 2. So as an overall stats package, the Ashen Elder is a really solid wizard and in contention for your secondary hero, right? You take a War Despot, let's look for a second hero. The Ashen Elder, thanks to his solid stat lines and combos with demon points, is a solid fighter as a whole. But the reason you take the Ashen Elder is, of course, for his ability, which is Furnace Blessing. So Furnace Blessing, you pick a visible friendly fighter. Once again, no range. You can see them, you can pick them. It also isn't faction locked at all. So you can take the Ashen Elder and then buff something out of faction like an ally, or take the Ashen Elder out of faction as an ally. And the effect is gain +1 attack, +1 strength to your attack actions. And of course, this lasts until the end of the battle round, not your next attack, not until the end of your activation, which can have some interesting ramifications if you take him as an ally and can get bonus activations. This will actually apply to those bonus activations as well. And of course, it applies to ranged attacks, which means you can buff things like, say, a Rat Ogre with gun. You can make that gun more powerful. It's kind of spooky. There's a lot of ways that this works outside of the Helsmiths. Within Helsmiths, this is a very powerful buff on everything. This makes everything better. Of course, it combos with your demon points. So if you buff something up with demon points, you're getting +2 strength, +2 attacks, and +1 crit. That's an incredible buff to literally anything in your warband. But specifically, this is very good at buffing your own ranged units, which we'll get to in a little bit. Importantly, you cannot bless yourself with Furnace Blessing because it has to be a visible friendly fighter, and fighters are not visible to themselves. But if there's another wizard, maybe another Ashen Elder, maybe a Demon Smith, which we'll get to in just a little bit, then you absolutely can use this to bless them, and they gain the strength and the attacks, making their wizard bolts even more powerful. And there's definitely a world where you use Furnace Blessing to bless something like a Demon Smith, and then use the Demon Smith to buff his own stats with demon points and turn that Demon Smith or second Ashen Elder into an absolute machine gun. There's a lot of play here. The only downside is that this is a triple, so it's quite expensive, but the effect is incredibly powerful. Now, moving on to the Demon Smith, I've mentioned the Demon Smith a few times. The Demon Smith is very much like the Ashen Elder in stats. The same defensive stats, the same ranged attacks, just worse in melee and 15 points cheaper, and also our cheapest hero that we have access to. So the Demon Smith has play just by being the cheapest hero in the warband, in addition to being a full-powered wizard, and still quite durable at T4 and 20 wounds. Of course, he works fantastically with the Ashen Elder to buff him up. He works great with demon points. He can buff his own stats up very effectively using demon points, and become quite a powerful ranged piece. But of course, the reason you take a Demon Smith outside of his stats and his cost is his ability, and his ability is not amazing. It's called Demon Smithing, and it has a range, which is unusual so far. It has a range of 8, and they have to be visible, but can target friendlies or enemies, and depending on what you target, a different thing happens. So if you pick an enemy, you subtract 2 from their toughness for the rest of the battle round. If you picked a friendly who does not have the terrifying rune mark, they gain +2 toughness. And if you pick a friendly fighter with the terrifying rune mark, then you can heal them by 3. This isn't faction locked, importantly, so you can take this guy to heal your terrifying models. An example that came up on stream is that the Demon Smith can heal Varangard, which is quite interesting. And of course, that -2 toughness has all kinds of potential combo play. The biggest one that again came up on stream was that the Rottmeier Creed's lethal injection from the Witherlord really likes demon smithing to make things weaker, so that lethal injection hit can land and deal catastrophic damage. Sadly, within the Helsmiths themselves, there's not all that much reason to use this ability because it's not that powerful when you compare it to other things like Black-Hearted Conqueror, Leave the Land in Ruin, and as we go on, things like Scorched Remains and Disciplined March. So it's kind of overshadowed within faction, but the potential of this ability to do some really interesting things out of faction or with allies is definitely there. So the Demon Smith definitely has a place. I'm just not entirely sure where that place is once the meta fully settles down. Moving on to their toys, their big things. We have 2 Dominator engines, one with Immolation Cannon and one with Bane Maces, and they're both about 300 points. Defensively, these are outstanding. Toughness 7, 40 wounds. They ain't going to die very quickly at all. And in terms of their raw damage output, they're both very good. The Immolation Cannon being a 12 attack, strength 2, 2/2 damage profile is actually really good. With no buffs, this thing is landing hits in the range of like 8 damage per shot. So if you were in range to fire twice, those 24 shots are looking at like 16 to 20 damage, regardless of what their toughness is. Of course, you can buff this guy's strength with blessings, with demon points, with the Ashen Elder. This guy can go all the way to strength 5, potentially. So that's like, 12 shots at strength 5, followed by 12 shots at strength 4, because demon points only last for 1 shot, remember. That is 24 shots, likely wounding most things on, 3s or 4s. You are then doing even more damage. If you're firing this with no buffs, you're still doing a staggering amount of damage, just thanks to the weight of numbers that just erupt from this model. The only downside, and we'll see this a lot with the Dominator engines, is that it's only got a 5-inch range on the Flamer. It has no minimum, so you can, if you fight it in combat, it'll just burn you anyway, which is quite nice, because its melee is pretty terrible. But its base is huge, right? 80 millimeters without any kind of like movement tricks or fly. He will struggle to get around. The model's also big. Like the actual model itself is tall and wide, which means you might not be able to fit it like through gaps or around the board effectively, making it very hard to get the Dominator where you want to go. The little 5-inch threat range though does give you a bit of leeway with that, making the Immolation Cannon the easiest of the bunch to use. But for me, I actually prefer the Dominator engine with the Bane Maces, and that's because I'm just a sucker for big smashy melee things. Big unga bunga, right? This guy has range 2, which is very important. Again, 80 mil base, range 2. You get this guy, on an objective and you threaten the whole objective and then some. This guy has incredible threat presence. 4 attacks, very nice. Strength 8, which means you're wounding everything on the game, including other Dominator engines on a 3 with 3/6 damage, which is respectable damage. Remember, of course, you can bless this guy with things like, demon points, Ashen Elder, or even actual blessings like +1 attack, although I don't think +1 attack is actually needed here, because this guy can go all the way to 6 attacks without actual blessings because of the buffs that exist within the Chaos Dwarfs themselves. This guy is basically, you get him into the middle of the board, you stand there and you control that space. If anything tries to take your space, I can't think of anything that reliably fights a Dominator engine and wins. He has too many wounds, his toughness is simply too high, he tanks for days, right? Most things are wounding him on a 5, right? Like, some of the strongest things in the game are only strength 5 or strength 6. Vexmore being the sole exception at strength 10, and of course, other Dominator engines at strength 8. So the vast majority of Warcrier's cast struggle to hurt him. He has one of the highest wound totals of any non-monster in the game, and his attack stats are devastating. So this guy in the middle controls space. Will you actually get into combat with him? It's actually quite unlikely, unless the board is really sparse in terms of terrain and you can move around a bit freely. The odds of him actually doing anything noticeable in combat are quite low because he's so clunky. But in the similar vein to like Vexmo is not really expected to kill, he's expected to stand around and look threatening, and there's nothing quite as threatening as a Dominator engine holding the line. So this guy is quite powerful, and they both of course come with abilities, and that ability is a double called Demonic Furnace Heat, which is just -1 attack. It's a big old bubble and of 3 inches. Remember, this guy's got a huge base. He's covering quite a large portion of the board, and enemies in that bubble are -1 attack, even if they're not attacking the Dominator engine, right? It debuffs them all regardless. So you factor that in, and these Dominator engines go from being just pure kill machines to being actually really powerful support and defense. They're very hard to kill innately. You can make them even harder to kill, but anything nearby also becomes harder to kill. So they're quite versatile in what they want to do. It's just held back substantially by their cost, for one, and just how big they are. You might simply struggle to make use of them and move them around the board. And if a 30-year warband simply can't function because of how the game works, then that's not a great thing. So the Dominator engine is undeniably very powerful, very, very powerful, but it might be a noob trap, right? A trap that you take thinking it will achieve things, but because of its actual place, its size, its presence, it simply can't function. And we see that a lot with monsters. A lot of monsters also struggle with this. And this guy is almost the size of a small monster. In fact, I think he's the size of a Dankhold in base, but Dankholds have other advantages like Dragon Maul, which the Dominator engine simply does not. So he has some issues, but he's very interesting, and I would love to see what people do with this guy, because there's some funky lists you can run with him that really help him to shine. Moving on to more very interesting things, we have a 2-for-1, the Anointed Sentinel and the Bull Centaur. These are 190 and 180 points respectively, and they are quite squishy. Toughness 4 and 18 wounds is shockingly soft, but still durable enough that they can take a hit from most things and still operate fine. Their main draw is their movement 9, which is very, very fast, even with mounted, meaning you can run around the board and do things that your other guys simply can't do, because even with Blackhearted Conqueror, they're only movement 3. So if you want raw speed, this is where the Centaurs and the Sentinels come into play. And to me, I think that is definitely enough of a justification, before anything else, to make them an interesting pick within the Helsmiths of Hashut. Now, starting with the Anointed Sentinel, though, this lad has range 2, 4 attacks, strength 5, and 2/4 damage. This is a really nice profile. That range 2 is beautiful. It gives him more threat range. He has lots of attacks at a good strength. You can buff all those stats even higher, to a 5, 6, 2, 5 with just demon points. I like to give mine +1 crit, so he's a 2/5 at base. He elevates to 2/6. It's very good. The Bull Centaur, on the other hand, is cheaper and has slightly worse offensive stats. 5 attacks, strength 4, 2/3 damage. Like, you're losing a crit, you're losing a strength, you're losing a ranged, but you're also saving 10 points and gaining an attack, which is a solid trade-off. Where both of these really shine, though, is in their unique abilities, and their abilities are both wonderful. They're both wonderful. We haven't seen abilities like either of these really until this update. And in the case of the Sentinel, I don't think we've ever seen an ability like the Sentinels, but we'll get into it now. Starting with Crush the Unworthy, which is used by the Bull Centaur. Basically, after you do a move action, if you end within 1 inches, you can make another bonus move action of 8 inches that can pass through enemy models. The only restriction being you have to then end within 1 inch of an enemy model after that move. In addition, you then gain +1 to your attack stat in melee. So this is basically a slingshot. You move in, you then catapult through the enemy and get into their backline to attack their squishy bits. And this has so many potential use cases to get to objectives, to get to squishy backline chaff, to get to ranged units, to chase down treasure carriers, right? The extra attack is also really powerful. The move aspect itself is debatably worth the triple itself. The extra attack, bearing in mind that Onslaught is now a triple since its FAQ, the extra attack is just gravy on top of that, right? And when this guy already has 5 attacks, he's elevating himself to 6 attacks. With demon points, he goes to 7 attacks. So when he's swinging in with his 7 attacks, he is just blending through that squishy backline that he really wants to get into, and there's very little your opponent can do to stop him because he can just move through enemies almost like he has fly. It's not quite fly because you can't ignore terrain and you are mounted, but enemies cannot stop you, and his attack profile becomes quite impressive. 7 attacks, strength 5, 2/4 damage. Once you use demon points and this ability, is really spicy. Like with the United Sentinel, I really like giving this guy +1 crit with a blessing. It's only 10 points. He then goes to 2/4 damage base, 2/5 damage with demon points, and you're really hitting hard then. You are just crushing through chaff and a lot of squishy range things. You can even throw this guy into bigger things like Slan, and just the weight of attacks will do damage. You won't kill the Slan, but you can tie the Slan up, you can do a massive chunk of damage, and if you survive, well, you're still good in combat innately. You have 5 attacks base. Next turn, swing 10 more times, and potentially take that bigger thing out as well. Crush the Unworthy and the Bull Centaur is potentially incredibly powerful once you get this onto the tabletop. I've used it a few times now, and it feels very good to play with. It opens up avenues of play like nothing else, and the Bull Centaurs themselves are just good enough. They're just the right price. Their stats can be elevated and buffed in all kinds of ways, and they just do what they want to do. They just want to get in that backline and cause all kinds of issues. On the flip side, we have Zealous Counterattack, and this is for those Anointed Sentinels. So the Anointed Sentinels have less attacks, but have better damage and better strength and better range. The Zealous Counterattack, so if you've made a move action and you're also now attacking an enemy fighter within 1 inch of another Helsmiths Of Hashut warrior model, so anything but a grot, you gain a big buff. And when I say big, it's catastrophically big. +1 to your hit roll. Now, off the top of my head, I cannot think of another thing in Warcrier that does this. A +1 hit is kind of insane. This works on both ends of the scale, right? So if you look at your to hit scale, it impacts both ends. So on the far end, you now crit on a 5+. That's kind of spicy. Your crit's already 4. Like I said, I love to bless with +1 crit, so his crit's actually 5 in that case, and demon points push him to crit 6. So you're critting on a 5+ with this. In addition, you're hitting on a 2+, and that's really good, right? You're looking at somewhere between 4 to 6 attacks based on how you're using your demon points and your other buffs, rocking up at strength 6 to 6 damage potentially, hitting on 2s and critting on 5s. The Anointed Sentinel can just slap people. He just gets in there and just claps them with his big ass spear. And of course, he himself doesn't have to be within 1 inch of the enemy. He has a 2-inch range spear. He just has to be attacking something next to one of your friends. So you can have him at that 2-inch range, poking from safety and just clapping in with massive damage output, and do this turn on turn. And you don't even need to do that to make use of the United Sentinel as well. Like I said, the Bull Centaur and the United Sentinel's raw stats are all very, very good, even without their abilities. So once you're in there, once you've got that, those attacks coming off, you're locked into combat for a prolonged engagement, their raw stats combined with demon points and other buffs let them just pile through and push through that damage reliably, And when you need those abilities, you can use them, especially when their abilities are, let's move and then get an effect, right? We've seen this with Demon Points, you want to move, get the effect. With Crush the Unworthy, with Zealous Counterattack, move, get an effect. You want those like big moves, big hit, then get into a big old clustered combat and finish them off if they're not already dead. And both of these do that very, very well because their raw stats are so solid for their cost. Again, 190 or 180 points based on flavor. The Bull Centaur wants to get into their backline and the Anointed Sentinel wants to defend your frontline basically. So they do two very different things, but they're both very good and I can see both seeing play. And I recommend if you're starting with your Helsmiths, definitely take one of them in your list because that speed alone is very handy and these are some of the best combat pieces in our warband. Now moving on to things that are a little bit less exciting than giant cow robots and dwarf bulls. We have our Infernal Razors and I'm going to start with the Blunderbuss and look at this guy separately and not pair him together with his Flame Hurler buddy because these two actually operate in vastly different ways. The Blunderbuss is very expensive. You look at this guy, you look at his stats and you go, wow, that's a lot of points and those stats don't really convey that. And you'd be right. 155 points is a steep cost. But that being said though, 2 shots, strength 5, 2/4 damage isn't too shabby, especially at 15 inches. He's a bit of a sniper. And then you start to pile on like the Wombo combo, right? This is a warband all about stacking buffs, preparing for the Wombo and doing the combo at the right time to smash something you want dead based on what you're using. And the Blunderbuss is really good for this. The Blunderbuss can, with Demon Points, go to 3 shots, strength 6, functionally 2/5 damage at a range. With things like the Ashen Elder, he gains another +1 attack, another +1 strength. Right off the bat, the Blunderbuss is now just a machine gun sniper who will just blend through chaff like nobody's business. And of course, at strength 6, he's also punching through into tough things like Ard Boys, things like, your standard sword and board guys with their toughness 5, Iron Golem Legionnaires being another example. Even other Chaos Dwarf players take big meaty hits, even Stormcast. Remember, these guys can go up to strength 7. Strength 7. They can even punch through Stormcast toughness when buffed, which means everybody's in danger of taking a little bit of damage. And I say a little bit. With some buffs, these guys are looking at close to like 10 to 12 damage a turn, which means you're killing chaff and chunking everything else. And then you factor in their own ability, and then you realize that yes, they like to be supported with an Ashen Elder, but they can also operate independently when they need to, because they have the triple called Hateful Hail, and this lets you count 1 hit from your next missile attack action to be a crit instead. You are crit 5, because you will use this with Demon Points. You only need 1 Demon Point for that. Okay, you are at least going to be crit 5. You are going to be getting, ideally, 3 to 4 shots at crit 5. One of those hits becomes a crit. It's just so good. When you're firing 3 to 4 shots and you're landing a pretty much guaranteed 5 damage hit, and then the rest of them are hitting reliably, that one little hail of bullets is going to likely kill a chaff, and the second volley will likely either kill another chaff depending on what you're up against, or severely wound it. These guys are so good at reaching out and just popping off vulnerable little squishy pieces that your opponent wants to hide and do backfield objective stuff, do treasure stuff. These guys have the range and the punch just to leave holes in them, and into everything else they can just do reliable chunky damage. I love this guy. So far I've loved everybody bar the Demon Smith, right? He's such an interesting little pick. He is one of your best caddies for buffs, and he also rewards you heavily on the turns where you can do the insane like Space Brain Magical Christmas Land, the dream. You have 2 lots of triples in your pool. You burn Ashen Elder for Furnace Blessing, you burn 3 Demon Points, and you burn Hateful Hail all at the same time, and this guy becomes a menace. Is that a ridiculous amount of investment? Yes. But can you do it? Yes. And should you do it? Depending on the situation, maybe. So, you know, on the far end of the scale, this guy's kind of bonkers. If you overinvest, even with just light investment, the Infernal Razor with Blunderbuss is a joy to play with. He is so much fun. And funnily enough, so is the Infernal Razor with the Flame Hurler. This guy is substantially cheaper at 125 points and is another core source of damage for you because 6 attacks, strength 1, 2 damage is just a good profile. Strength 1, you ignore that, it doesn't matter. You can barely buff this guy up into more relevant ranges, right? With Demon Points and an Ashen Elder, you can go to like strength 3. That's probably not really worth it. Just the raw 6 shots, 2 damage, you're looking at somewhere in the region of like 4 to 6 damage per shot. And again, core thing to remember with these guys, with any Chaos Dwarf ranged unit, is that you never really want to move them. You want them to be moved by Blackhearted Conqueror because you want to maximize how many shots you get off. With 12 shots, you're looking then at somewhere in the region of 8 damage. And 8 damage is just chunky damage. Nothing really wants to take 8 damage into the right kind of unit. You might just delete a chaff, like a Skaven, definitely something like a Goblin, a Witch Elf, even like a human model character, like a 10 wound model. These are all in danger of just being melted by a Flame Hurler. And this guy has, you know, toughness 4 and 12 wounds. He's fairly durable himself. And his damage output is just really nice. And of course, he's got a 6-inch range. You can just reach out and poke things from safety. That no minimum means you can also do this in combat and fire into combat when he needs to. And then you have his ability. And then you realize that so far, everything we've seen has a purpose and is at the very least quite good. And this guy has Scorched Remains, and this is situationally devastating for your opponent. You pick an enemy fighter that was allocated any damage points by your ranged attack. That fighter can't use abilities for the rest of the battle round. Incredible. This can shut off so many things. Calthea Zandaya, turn her off completely. If they've got like Wah or a Mega Boss with Great Wah, turn that off. No Wah for you. If they've got a monster with Dragon Maul, burn it. It can't use Dragon Maul. It's basically a wet noodle now because it can't get to you, right? Like, there's so many things you can do with Scorched Remains that just bones so many people, and it is incredibly reliable to get it off because all you have to do is land a single hit. You're rolling 6 dice. Regardless of strength, you are averaging 2 hits on that, right? So on average, you are meeting the activation criteria with a single shot, right? And then some. With 2 shots, you're more or less guaranteeing this, right? With 12 shots, you need 1 5+, and then boom, there you go. They can't do abilities. Potentially game-changingly good. This is an incredible ability on a model that's also great, right? Like, I would take 1, maybe even 2 Flame Hurlers in my list because they just make a super solid backline damaging core for your warband. They're super good, they love Blackhearted Conqueror, and they just love to mess with people. And then we get to our 3 basic dwarfs. We're going to talk about the spears and the swords. We'll go into the musician in a little bit. So starting with the spear and the swords, their stats are pretty good, right? They're looking at, you know, toughness 5, 12 wounds, movement 3, but they'll get a move for days anyway with their Blackhearted Conqueror. 3-4-2-3 or 3-3-2-4 based on spear or not to spear. And at 85 points, they're solid. They're solid. For dwarfs, they are just a solid dwarf profile. If you compare them to like their contemporaries within Dispossessed, especially now that Dispossessed have had their points changes revoked from the last FAQ, these compare very well. They compare reasonably to their other dwarven contemporaries in this price range. They're a little bit undertuned, a little bit anemic on the damage front, but of course you have demon points. You can buff these guys up quite effectively with your demon points, and they make a very solid backline to your force. They're quite difficult to kill thanks to their toughness 5. They can push out more damage than you would expect thanks to demon points and other buffs that we'll get to in a little bit. Spoiler, we have Gong. Gong makes this even better. And finally, they also have a fantastic ability, because all these abilities are fantastic apparently, and it's called Discipline March. For the rest of this fighter's activation, just have 2 move. There you go. So they go to movement 5 until the rest of the turn. Okay, that's amazing. That's rush on steroids. It's still a double, right? So it's just hyper rush. So not only can you move for free with Black-Hearted Conqueror, but when you need to move independently, you go to movement 10. You can just run 10 inches in a straight line, right? But also, you can you basically ignore engagement. You can make these move actions even if you're within 1 inch of an enemy, so you are unhindered by the typical rules of the game with Discipline March. So you're fast and you ignore engagement range. Wow, that's just, on a double, is incredible, right? They are so nimble, shockingly nimble. These are more nimble than most elves, right? They are incredibly fast and can just get around the board and get to where you want them to go, especially if you are stacking Black-Hearted Conqueror for those free moves, right? Discipline March also works wonderfully with demon points, because what does that do, right? It pushes you into this mentality of, I want to move and then attack. And well, with demon points and this bonus move, you get to move 5 inches. You've got a 1 or a 2 inch little threat bubble after that. You then get to attack with your demon points and get a stronger hit in for that one attack that you can get after moving faster than your opponent may expect. So they can definitely push out the damage when they need to. They can move around, do objectives. They can do treasure. This is the big one. They can do treasure incredibly well. So how this works, okay, with treasures, if you're engaged, you can't disengage. Treasure prevents you from disengaging, which means your treasure carriers can be tied up and locked down and beaten to death. It is so much harder to do this with the Infernal Cohort, because they don't need to disengage to run away. They can just move away because of how Discipline March works. So they are very tricky in so many little nuanced ways. Like, attack stats aren't the best. They're not meant to be massive murder machines. We have other very killy things in this warband. These guys aren't it, although they can fight. Do not fall into the impression that they can't fight. They can definitely fight. These guys are almost on par in terms of their raw damage output and the defensive stats as an Ardboy, and become better than an Ardboy in raw melee stats when you factor in their demon points. So they are not bad. They're just a little bit blunt at base in melee, but overall, once you factor in their buffs and their abilities, they have so much play. So many little things you can do with them that I think will really elevate the Infernal Cohort to some level of play. I would look to maybe see 1 to 2, maybe even 3 Infernal Cohort in a list, and you would have a really good time just getting around the board doing that. And then finally, we've got the Gong. So the final of our Infernal Cohort is the Gongman, or the Musician. This guy cannot use Discipline March. He's also worse in practically every stat. He's the same price though, so he's got less toughness and less attacks than his other buddies, but what he brings is just insane. Just insane. The Sacred Gong. It can't stack. This line here, remove all friendly gong carry tokens on the battlefield, means you can't stack it at all. But for the rest of the battle round, all Helsmith warriors, so anything but Hobgrots, gain +1 attack if they're within 12 inches of this gong guy. 12 inches. 12. 12. To put that into perspective, most +1 attack auras are triples, not doubles. Most +1 attack auras have an activation clause, like you have to kill somebody first, and are still triples. And most +1 attack auras are 3 inches, not 12, and are still triples. This being a 12-inch clauseless double +1 attack, faction locked, is insane. Like, just the bubble is so big. To put into perspective, a 12-inch bubble is almost half the board. Based on your positioning on that board, you could cover almost half the board with this bubble, which means a Sacred Gong buff can help people across multiple deployment groups. You could have your bull centaurs in their backline. You could be fighting on the midline and supporting things near your backline all at the same time. It completely fixes and overrides the biggest issue with +1 attack buffs, and that is your opponent can just move away, right? And then the thing that wants to attack with that buff has to chase and maybe leave that bubble. It's really low tempo. It has all kinds of negatives because the bubble is so small. This has none of those issues, apart from low tempo. Right? You've got to obviously spend the activation using the gong, and that can have issues and drawbacks, and you've always got to bear that in mind. But bar the tempo issue, Sacred Gong just has none of the other issues. There's none of them at all. It's so cheap, the bubble is so big, and it makes everything better. So much better. And of course it combos with demon points, it combos with the Ashen Elder. Like, you look at their stat lines and you go, ah man, that's just not that great. And then you factor in the potential of +3 attacks, +2 strength, and +1 crit. At will, anywhere. It's like, what the heck are they thinking about? It's wild. The amount of stacking buffs that you can do in Helsmiths, if you go all out on resource investment, is actually kind of bonkers. But even with just like little concentrated bursts of buffs, +1 attack from Sacred Gong makes everything so much better. So much better. I mean, just going through it, right? The War Despot goes to 5 attacks. We'll factor in demon points too, right? So the War Despot, 6 attacks, right? The Immolation Engine, 6 attacks. 6 attacks on the Sentinel. 8 attacks on the Bull Centaur because he has a +1 attack on his own ability, right? Like, even the basic guys, 5 attacks on the Infernal Cohort, right? Like, these are not tiny stat lines now. These become big stat lines when you start stacking these buffs. And if you're getting your demon points generated early, you can stack these buffs very effectively, and Gong is so easy to use. It's so easy to use. There's just so little drawback bar that tempo. So if you use it the wrong time, you might just get completely clobbered. But if you can set up in just the right way to get this Gong off, your whole warband benefits. It's so good. You definitely want a Gong in your list. Hands down. Worst stats be damned, you want the Gong in there. You want the Gong buffing at the very least your little guys. Because your little guys, like I said, their stats are a bit blunt. You fix them right up, right? Like a 4-4-2-3 is nothing to snuff at, right? Like, this guy's going to hit like a ton of bricks. He's going to kill all the chaff really effectively. He's going to fight with the mid-range really effectively. If you start supporting with demon points, he gets even better. He's just punching way above his weight. It's so good. So again, Gong, love it. Absolutely love Gong. Can't scoff it at all. And then we end out on the Hobgrot Vandal. And the Hobgrot Vandal, I think, will get a lot of people upset because he is awful. Okay, on paper, he's awful. He can't use Leave the Land in Ruin, so he can't generate you demon points. He can't use demon points because he's not a warrior. He doesn't get Gong buffs. He can be buffed by Ashen Elder, but why would you ever do that, right? So within the makeup of the Helsmiths, the Hobgrot Vandal doesn't actually interact well with anything all that much. He can be moved by Black-Hearted Conqueror, so remember that he can be moved in that way. But then you look at his stats. His attack stats are awful, and his defensive stats are not great, and he's only movement 3. So he's one of the worst goblins in the whole game. Right off the bat, right? He's the slowest goblin. He's got more wounds than most goblins, but he's also got just really bad stats. And he's 65 points, so he's also more expensive than most other goblins or grots or their equivalent. So he's very expensive. So you look at this and you go, man, they fucked it, right? why would you ever take a hobgrot? And I think this is very intentional design, like not a mistake, not an algorithmic issue. It's very intentional design. If they wanted hobgrots to be priced effectively, they would. But I think what they've tried to do here is make it so the Helsmiths simply are not the ideal candidate for allies, right? So if they made hobgrots like 50 points, which they should probably be about 50, 55 points, then what happens? Well, then the Helsmiths become just the go-to faction to pile on allies and become like a pseudo ally caddy, right? And that's clearly not what they want because of their battle trait, right? Their battle trait disincentivizes that. The Hobgrot Vandal disincentivizes that. But what does 65 points scream to you, right? Because also it screams, well, we don't want you just spamming this model out and making your warbands all Hobgrot Vandals and big toys, because that's not their design intent, right? You've got so many, every model in this warband has a unique ability, right? They want you to build with the toolbox and not go, we'll just take like 7 Hobgrot Vandals and a few big things, right? They don't want that. They've made them too expensive to do that, whilst making them still very useful, because at 65 points, they are still your cheapest model, 20 points cheaper than the Infernal Cohort. So they're noticeably cheaper than the contemporaries. They don't overshadow anything, and they exist to allow you to bulk out your list a little bit. You might take 1 or maybe 2 Hobgrots, but you ain't spamming them, right? You're going to be taking everything else, and then, you know, to maybe save a few points here and there, you might take 1 Hobgrot, and that's the way to go. But that's not all. Because Hobgrots have the additional benefits of being the target of their reaction. So I haven't talked about this yet, but their reaction is potentially just the source. Just straight up the source. So it's used by any Helsmith warrior. So the Hobgrot itself does not use the reaction. It's merely targeted by the reaction. So you've got to spend resources here to use it. But the effect is incredible. Basically, if your Hobgrot can see the thing that's attacking your guy and he's within 3 inches of the guy being targeted, he teleports to your friend and becomes the target of the attack. So there are so many layers to this, so many layers, that really just make this incredible. Like, really powerful. Firstly, a teleport is great, right? So you could, you know, you react on a Infernal Razor or a Leader or your Cow Dreadnought, and then the Hobgrot teleports. And he teleports, you know, 3 inches, but he doesn't though, right? You could be on the very tip of that 3-inch bubble, right? Tiptoed into that 3-inch bubble, and then you teleport within 1 inch. You could teleport on the other side of your friend's base, right? On the very tip. So you've actually moved closer to 6 inches with that teleport. Ignoring terrain, ignoring engagement zones, ignoring everything. You've just teleported roughly 6 inches on like the far end of this scale, right? That's an incredible move for one. This lets you propel goblins onto objectives, propel them into engagement ranges with people who maybe aren't even the guys who are attacking your guy, just propelled into a different engagement range, propelled, into a range of a treasure carrier, simply just put into engagement range with the guy attacking your friend. If they've got like a range 2 spear, well then now your goblin's in 1 inch and now they can't attack a second time because the goblin's there blocking the second hit if he survives. So many plays just from the teleport. Very powerful teleport. But then you factor in that it says attack action and not melee attack action. This means that if the Hobgrot can see somebody who is shooting your friends, you can teleport the goblin, okay, in the exact same way, and then he absorbs the shot from the guy. Right? So he absorbs the shot. So things like Slan are devastating. You don't want your guys being shot by Slan. So, oh no, he's going to shoot one of my centaurs. He's going to shoot whatever else. hang on, my goblin teleports in the way, takes the hit, and in this slan example, on average, the goblin survives. He has 8 wounds. He's not a goblin, he's a hobgrot. Hobgrots have 8 wounds, not the traditional goblin of 6. So against a 3-6 profile, even with 3 shots, the average is only 6 damage. So the hobgrot might survive the shot, waste the action, and then is free on his turn because he didn't use any actions to teleport. That was his mate. He could then move off and do what he wants to do, right? Just skedaddle off, take objectives, and be a pain with his 1 wound left, right? But Disposable Lackeys has just such interesting play potential in just dropping all of the shenanigans. It's great. It's so good at stopping range attacks, melee attacks, protecting your big things, keeping things alive, right? There's all kinds of silly plays that are a little bit on the niche side, but are fun. And this reaction has just all kinds of just enough sauce that it makes the hobgrot worth considering. And not only that, at 65 points, whilst not being the best value, if you look at a game from an external view, externally as an external balance measure, the hobgrot vandal is not good value. Internally, if you look at it within the context of Helsmiths, hobgrot vandals are really solid, and you will likely take 1 in most of your lists, maybe even 2, depending on how many big things you want. Speaking of your lists, let's go over a couple of lists now. So onto lists, and we're going to start with a Dominator engine list because I know that you want to see a Dominator engine, and I will not hold out on you. This is my Dominator engine list with all the trimmings, right? We are still hitting 7-man. You can squeeze to 8 if you really wanted to. I just think you'd lose out on a lot of the fun of Chaos Dwarfs if you do that. Like if you really want to bulk out on numbers and just take a whole bunch of hobgrots and an engine, you can. Your list might even hit 9, but it's going to likely hit 8. That's a boring list. I'm not going to even bother pushing that. We're pushing all the trimmings. We have a War Despot because Black-Hearted Conqueror is too good. We have Ashen Elder because Furnace Blessing is fun. We have the Dominator engine with Bane Maces because this guy is just your bulky, I will control all the space. If you come near me, I will kick the living shit out of you with my incredible stats. Of course, you could Ashen Elder buff him, Demon Point buff him, Gong buff him in this case because, spoiler, Gong exists. It's a fun time. So we've got the Ashen Elder, the engine, but then we have the Sprinkler Source. We have a Blunderbuss. They're expensive. We have a lot of expensive things in this list, but we're taking a Blunderbuss here because that has more synergy with the Ashen Elder. So you can buff this guy up, or the Dominator engine, or your War Despot. You've got lots of options for this buff. I like to buff the Blunderbuss when it's more relevant. So Blunderbuss is a great target for that. Then we have a Gong to make all your melee guys better in combat. We have a Spear because I prefer the Spear to the sword and board variant because the extra range means you can stay a bit safer and still dish out decent damage. And then a Hobgrot Vandal because exactly like how I said, the Hobgrot Vandal is there to squeeze in just right at the end and just slide into lists perfectly. And he does. He slides in perfectly and lets you take this absolutely stunking list. Will this list win you games? Absolutely. Will this list be top tier competitive? I don't know. I don't think so. Largely because it all comes down to that Dominator engine. It's all about your local meta. It's all about how you deploy your boards and how much terrain you have. If you are playing Warcry as intended, aka your board is filled with terrain, then Dominator engine actually gets weaker and stronger based on your perspective. It gets weaker because you can't move around as effectively. He gets stronger because the Dominator engine is the best thing in the game when it comes to doing Leave the Land in Ruin. He hits the most terrain at once. So you'll have all the demon points, all the points for days because this guy's in your list. But he wants to be able to effectively move on the board. If he can't, you might struggle because then you're running as a 6-man list and your big cow isn't pulling his weight. So it's tricky. But this is the kind of list I would try to look for, or something adjacent to this if you're going with Big Cow. You don't just want Big Cow. I think you want Big Cow and trimmings. and Ashen Elders, gongs, war despots, blunderbusses are the kind of trimmings you're really looking for. And of course that little hobgrot to jump in the way and tank a cheeky hit for that Dominator engine, just for the lols, right? So list number 2 is more of a standard Helsmiths list, I think. This again has all the trimmings that you'd want to see, and this more focuses on flame hurlers than anything else, but you've basically got one of everything here. So of course you have the War Despot for that Black-Hearted Conqueror's Ashen Elder, because he's got such a powerful buff. That Bull Centaur, who is just a phenomenal piece to run around and just burst through the backlines. I like to give him +1 crit. You could also drop him for an Anointed Sentinel +1 crit, and it still fits in perfectly. If you take the Bull Centaur, you can also give +1 crit to the War Despot, increasing your damage overall. You have 2 Flame Hurlers just for really good area control and damage output. That Gong, the Gong is a little bit less effective in this list just because there's just less melee threats here. We've got like 3 ranged threats in our 8-man list, but Gong still helps with the Spear, the Despot, the Centaur, and even the Ashen Elder in melee. He definitely has a place here. You then have a Spear and a Hobgrot Vandal. My only issue with this list is that the Ashen Elder is here, but the Ashen Elder doesn't quite have that one thing you really want to make big and swole. But I still think this is a great jumping off point, and this list was also suggested on stream by somebody, and I actually like this quite a lot. And the final list I have for you, just as a jumping off point for your starting of the Helsmiths of Hashut, we have the Blunderbuss list, because I love that Blunderbuss and I want this guy in this list as well. We have a War Despot, of course, an Ashen Elder, of course, a Bull Centaur, although you could absolutely change this for an Anointed Sentinel if you prefer. You have the points leeway for that. You have 10 points left over as well, so if you do take the Bull Centaur, slap on +1 crit, you're good to go. You have that Infernal Blunderbuss. This is your Ashen Elder target. You want to buff this guy up and just start blasting away from turn 1, turn 2. You have the Gong, and the Gong works so well in this list because we only have melee stuff. Bar that Blunderbuss, we have the Despot, we have the Ashen Elder, who's pretty good in combat once he's buffed up, the Centaur or the Sentinel based on preference, and then we have 3 Infernal Cohort. Ideally always Spears. I like Spears. If you want to be more aggressive and more killy, you can instead take the Blades. The Blades are more deadly because of the higher strength. I just don't think strength is a massive benefit when you have things like demon points to push your strength to strength 4 on those spears anyway, and the extra crit really comes into play because those spears become a 4-4-2-5. That's a really nice profile to have on those spears once you start to invest those demon points. And this is the kind of list I would like to see as well. You have a bit of range, a bit of speed, a bit of support, and just a nice solid backline of chunky dwarfs. So this is like my ideal list is something like this. I would like to squeeze in a flamer. You absolutely can, for the record, like, you know, dropping off a couple of these spears, taking a grot and a flamer completely fits, if I recall correctly. So there's lots of leeway here to just squeeze in what you want to squeeze. You could take out the Ashen Elder, take more guys, bulk out a bit more, take other toys. There's a lot of play here, but overall, this is the kind of list I like to see. Just a full toolbox of toys you can just take to the field and just experiment with. And at this point, when a warband's just been released, this is the kind of thing you want to try and make. You want to try and just try everything, right? Pick up little bits of everything, try the entire toolbox, and then just push it all together to find your ideal list. None of these lists are intended to be top tier competitive. You will take this and win any game. All these lists, like any list I post in my videos, are here as a jumping off point for you to try and just piece it all together yourself, but having a solid backing basis to do that. And I think all 3 of these lists really help you experiment with every facet of the Helsmiths, and that's exactly what you want to do, with the exception of the Demon Smith, because I am not the biggest fan of the Demon Smith within Helsmiths themselves. And that's Haunts of Hashut. I really like what Games Workshop have done with these guys. They are a lot of fun to play on the tabletop. They have so many just fun little toys and just unique design spaces that they're operating within. There's nothing quite like them. If you're going into Helsmiths disappointed because you can't ally effectively with them, you can't take allies without losing a lot of flavor, then I understand that might be disappointing. But at the same time, it's nice to see a warband that is clearly being designed from the ground up to just be within themselves, right? We're seeing more of this internal design as Warcry ages. We saw this to a degree with the new Dark Oath stuff, and it's definitely in play here as well. And honestly, I'm all for it. I'm a little bit tired of seeing the same cookie allies being slotted into everything the second something gets released. So I'm really happy that Helsmiths are disincentivizing that on multiple levels, with the Hobgrots and the Battle Trait both working in tandem to really just sort of like nip that in the bud, whilst also not completely removing the option for allies, because you do have a lot of non-faction locked abilities like the Ashen Elder and the Demon Smith, so you can definitely have some really fun combos internally and externally with them. They just prefer to operate nice and contained within themselves, which makes sense from a lore perspective, as these are just a bunch of chaos worshipping, isolationist, big-hatted dwarfs. And that's the end of this video. If you liked what you saw, leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And of course, let me know in the comments down below what you think of the new Chaos Dwarfs. I obviously really like these guys, and I'm excited to get them to the tabletop more often and really dive into what they bring to Warcry. Let me know what you think, and until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra. Hey all, Toast here, and welcome to the post-toast credits. A massive shout out to all of my patrons and members, but an extra special shout out to all my algorithmic demon slayers: ABUNDCD, Andy Morris, blah blah blah, Brioche, Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Lord Phylax, Maps, Paulo Fernando Conclavis Perez Vahiro, Sable Saber, Steve Bean, Houston Toad, and Velas. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I'll catch you all next time.